Hello and welcome to Occupied Thoughts, a podcast brought to you by the Foundation for Middle East Peace. I'm Matt Duss, the Executive Vice President at the Center for International Policy, a former foreign policy advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders, and a past president of the Foundation for Middle East Peace. I was president of FMEP from 2014 to 2016. Which is where I think I first met our guest today, Brian Barber. Brian, we may have met before I joined FMEP, but it was, I think, around that time. Today is August 13th, 2025, and I'm so glad to be here with Brian. Brian is the author of the newly published book, No Way But Forward, Life Stories of Three Families in the Gaza Strip, which we will discuss today. Brian is also a professor emeritus of the University of Tennessee. Before we start the discussion, I think we just take a moment. We're here in August. We are almost 2 years into this absolutely unspeakable, devastating catastrophe in Gaza. Um, that I think challenges us all. It challenges me personally every day, just not only intellectually but emotionally to deal with what we are continuing to see, and the failure um, of the ability of the civilized world to stop it, and our own government not just to not stop it, but which continues to facilitate it. Um, so I just wanted to open it and say that because I think what I love about your book, and one of the reasons I'm so honored and happy to be able to talk with you about it, is it has a deep humanity. It has a deep love for the people of Gaza, for the Palestinian people, but of humanity in general. And I think that is something that we lack right now. And it's something that is really, really important to hold on to as we look at this still ongoing catastrophe, but also as we think about, okay, let's once hopefully we're able to get a ceasefire, um, the rebuilding of Gaza that will be necessary, but what lessons we have to learn to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. Um, so having said that, Brian, can you just talk a little bit about the book? I have a number of questions, and I'll say again, it's a really extraordinary piece of work. But go ahead and just tell us a little bit about it, how you came to write it, and what you want people to take away from it.
Sure, good to see you, Matt. And I want to echo your comments about the gravity of today. We all feel it deeply, but of course not so deeply as those in Gaza. I happen to be in regular touch with the three families that I profiled in the book, sometimes on even a daily basis, and the reports are really, really grim. So the I had one purpose in the book, really, and that it was to satisfy an obligation I felt to Palestinians. That is, after now 3 full decades of knowing them, of living with them, of being with them regularly every year for weeks or months. Um, all of their generosity they gave to me, the hospitality, the feeding, the respect, not holding me accountable for my government's actions. Through all of that, they only asked one thing of me, and that was to tell their story. And so this book is my best effort to date to tell that story. And we did a lot of academic research work on Palestinian families prior to me writing this book, and we've published many things in prestigious academic health journals. And I think we made contributions there, meaningful contributions to the academy. But this is a book for everyone to read, to really understand finally the day-to-day lives of people living under a brutal military occupation, which was brutal even when I started going there in 1995 and 1996, but as we know, it's just heinous now. The methodology for the book was not me writing about my thoughts and observations. Rather, I wanted to get as close to them telling their stories as possible. So my method was to asked them to define for me the major moments of their lives from childhood on, moments, key decision moments, moments when they felt powerful or not, moments that shaped them in their own minds. And they told me those stories through repeated interviews over the decades. And I simply narrated those chapters of their lives as they identified them. And so really you're hearing directly from them as closely as one could. You're right. So that's kind of a synopsis of why I did the book.
So talk a little bit about how you first went to Gaza, what brought you there, a little bit of background on your initial interest, a little bit about yourself, first of all, like where you from originally, and how you were led to Gaza.
Okay, I'm from Los Angeles, California. And I ended up doing a PhD in family sociology at Brigham Young University, who at the time became very interested in studying Palestinian families. This was 1994, so a year after the Oslo Accord. And there was some concern expressed by some scholars that the Palestinian family may have lost a lot of its strength during the Intifada because the youth expressed so much autonomy out on the streets throwing stones daily, that somehow people were concerned that that may have interrupted the authority bounds in the family. And so,
Because the idea being that this was a rejection of their elders' failure
yeah,
to liberate them.
yeah, very, very good point. Right. Um, Plus just them stepping out
Yeah.
and, doing what
Like
they wanted to
like
do,
the youth do. Yeah.
like you, as we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was asked to join that research team because I was developing expertise in youth, and obviously youth were fundamental to the Intifada. And I must say, frankly, that I was disinterested in joining, and I refused to join for the longest time, simply because I was busy studying youth and families in multiple cultures around the world through an NIH grant, uh, and I didn't have any interest in the Middle East, I have to say, somewhat shamefully now, but I didn't. I bought into the thin stereotypes of hot desert, angry people, and I couldn't have told you in 1994 where the Gaza Strip was, and I couldn't have told you coherently what the Palestinian issue was.
Mm.
They seduced me with a free trip, which still works. And I went and agreed to, go on the first trip with them, help them design their study, and then I would return and continue my own work. As virtually everyone I know who has gone to Palestine before, I had the same experience where we're kind of stunned by what we encounter on the ground. In my case, it was twofold. So the first one that everyone experiences is that we find a gentle, humble, kind, extremely intelligent, ambitious people, as opposed to the angry, vengeful,
Right.
evil Palestinians that we keep being fed stories about through pundits and the like, even today,
Right.
unfortunately.
And also you try makluba.
I
And
what?
and then but you also try makluba, the food.
Yeah, I had that. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how quickly I had that in our first visit. Probably
Or
was
or
within
whatever
1 or
dish
2
you
days.
first have that forces you to say, okay,
Yeah,
I need to stay here a while.
yeah. That food is tremendous, and but the first shock was this. How it was actually a feeling of anger. How dare I have been
Yeah.
misled to believe such awful things about really good
Yeah.
people.
And I'll
The
say
second
that,
thing was more professional. In theoretical approaches to mental health in those days, and sadly still today, We are taught that a human being who's exposed to a traumatic moment can be severely injured psychologically and socially for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
And so, having believed that, studied and taught that, I came knowing that I was about to encounter a generation of young Palestinians who had been through 6 consecutive years of traumatic moments. Out on the streets, throwing stones, being arrested, being imprisoned, being beaten, having their arms broken, you name it. And so I was expecting a really messed up population of young people. Come to find out through the study that I quickly agreed to join, not just advise on, we were able to demonstrate rigorously, scientifically, that this was a population of young people who were doing well. High self-esteem, self-confidence, performing, working hard in school. I spoke to at least 80 classrooms of 9th grade students in the course of our 2 years of doing that study, and found them to be a remarkably respectful, honorable group of youth. And so I was stunned as a professional. I mean, how can this be? This shouldn't be. Somehow they should be messed up, because that's what we've been thinking and teaching.
Mm.
And so that was the reason for me to stay, was to try to figure out an answer to why that was the case.
Mm.
And we did our project in West Bank and East Jerusalem in 1994-95, where we studied 5,000 Palestinian families, in each a mother, father, and a teenage child. So a huge project. And then we did it. The research team was kind of satisfied with that effort. It was a huge effort, and something we should have been proud of. But for me, I couldn't represent that I was a knowledgeable of how Palestinian families have had not gone to Gaza, right? It just made no sense logically. So I took the project to Gaza, and we did another 2,000 families, so a total of 7,000 families. But in Gaza, it came clear to me that the only way I was going to be able to understand this phenomenon of well-functioning after severe trauma, sustained trauma, was to try to understand the culture better, because what I had in my head was inadequate to explain. So I decided that in Gaza I would dive deep into the culture, become more of an anthropologist, cross-cultural psychologist than I had been before, and simply listen and learn. I contacted the head of the UNRWA education system in Gaza, who had become a close friend by then, and asked him if he could help me find a family who would welcome me to live with them. I figured refugee camp Gaza was probably as deep into Palestine as I could go. So I wanted to live in the camps, and I wanted one member of that family to be able to speak English well enough to be able to start teaching me Arabic. Within 3 days, Abu Ali called back and said, "I have your family." He had simply called a family that he respected, and when the strength of trust in those days was such that when Abu Ali calls you and says, "I'd like you to host this Professor Barber," your answer to that is, "Well, of course, if you respect them, we respect them." No other questions needed to be asked. Excuse me. So then I began, this is 1996 summer, I began living with the Al-Fakawi family in Khan Yunis refugee camp, whose son Hammam is one of the characters that I profile in this book. And so from then on, I lived for long periods of time every year, typically 2 trips, one in the spring, one in the fall, weeks long, months long, still listening, still interviewing, still trying to understand, as well as a foreigner can, how this remarkable group of people continue to move on despite these circumstances.
Just backing up a little, like your first point about the the feelings you had when you realized that you had been misled about uh, Palestinians. That's something I've encountered a lot. I've had the opportunity to lead a number of trips of analysts, journalists, just groups to Israel and Palestine over the last about 15 years. And that's something, again, I encounter a lot. Like people who have very little experience, know they've never traveled there before. They've never met a Palestinian in Palestine, or perhaps even in the United States. And just there's a real sense of anger that they've been so propagandized, not just against Palestinians, about Arabs and Muslims in general, but particularly against Palestinians, as kind of this uniquely violent and dangerous community.
Yeah.
And the realization that when the kind of scales fall from their eyes after their first day or even hours just um, with people there is always pretty striking to me. Um, but talk a little bit about the three, I guess the three, we'll call them the main characters, Khalil, Hammam, and Hussam. How did you come to meet them?
Mhm.
You've been, you write, your narrative kind of goes back until just after the 67 war and the occupation. They were all born after 67. They were raised in the occupation, under occupation, and then later under the intensified blockade that came after the Hamas takeover. So just talk a little bit about these three really, really amazing, no longer young men, but just Palestinian men, how you came to meet them and what they what they had to say and what they gave to you.
Sure. You're right. All of them are Gazans, born in Gaza after 67. So the only thing they have known is life under the military occupation of Israel. Um, all were born in refugee camps, two in Khan Yunis camp, um, but at opposite ends of that rather large camp. The other in Nuseirat camp. Um, and all have stayed in Gaza. All have had moments when they could leave for educational purposes. Two of them have PhDs. One of them wanted to get graduate school, but Israel would not let him out. So mostly, though, they've been in Gaza, stayed in Gaza, and want to live in Gaza. You know, full stop. Gaza is their home. They've chosen it over other options in the past. So Hammam was the first I mentioned. I lived with in that first summer and many times afterwards. And it's in his home that I've always stayed when I've returned over the years. Khalil was born in Khan Yunis camp as well, but at the very west end near the what was then settlements, Gush Etiv settlements.
Mm.
When I was staying with Hammam that first summer, there was this knock on the big iron gate outside of the home, and one of Hammam's younger brothers came and told me, "Hey, there's someone here for you." And I said, "That can't be. I don't know anyone in Gaza. No one knows me here." And sure enough, it was Khalil Abishamala who um, was well known to a guy named Dick Doughty, who had written a book about Gaza years before. And I had been in contact with Dick just briefly. And apparently, Dick told Khalil about my visit to Khan Yunis and sent him. And so Khalil came and simply said, I've come to take care of you.
Mm.
And so then we became friends. I stayed at his home as well. And he became, one of my characters um, because of my ability to access him frequently and because his very interesting story.
Mm.
Hussam, born in Nuseirat camp, was referred to me by other friends in Gaza as someone who was a leader during a youth leader during the Intifada in his camp, and would be someone to talk to if I really wanted to understand someone who was extremely active during that movement. And so I went to Nuseirat and interviewed Hussam, and he was eager and very bright, very articulate, very polished English, and he was full of information that was so useful to me in trying to understand, what that movement was and how youth engaged and how they responded, et cetera. And so he became a regular interviewee, and so I know hundreds of other youth in Gaza, of course, through the research project, but these three seem to me to be three who are distinct enough to present a varied story about middle class Gazan life.
Yeah. So you've obviously been in touch with them throughout this war, throughout this genocide. You're still in touch with them. I know you include a really remarkable set of, text exchanges in the book. Hearing from them, as you mentioned, you're in touch with them sometimes daily. Um, it seems like um, a, a stupidly broad question, but just what is it like? What has it been like to just maintain contact with them during this era-defining catastrophe?
Yeah. So the final part of the book is where I simply record their direct messages to me on WhatsApp for the first year of the genocide. So from October 7, 23 to October 7, 24. Just their raw messages. Occasionally, I filtered out most of my part of the conversations because they were not so relevant, but here you get a play-by-play of what it was like to encounter this growing monster of an attack.
Yeah.
And so in those narratives, and ever since now almost a year, I have another almost year worth of those messages that I'm going to put together in another book. Here you hear them speak personally about it, what it's like to be displaced. I think all of them at least 6 times, some of them up to 10 times, back and forth to homes that were partially destroyed and then destroyed again. What it's like to get these evacuation orders and see your quadrant on the map with a red X on it that says we're going to attack tomorrow, so leave. The displacements, the illnesses. Several of their family members have suffered from hepatitis and other illnesses. Hussam's brother was the first casualty on October 7, 2023, when a missile hit him directly while he was walking on the beach. And right, so you're hearing them talk about these very profound and distressing issues. Their worry, they're all very devoted fathers, and you hear their worry and pain about what's going to happen to their children. And for the first 9 months or so, one thought you could get out of Gaza, and so we tried to help get their kids out of Gaza. But of course, that has not been possible for over a year. And so now they're stuck with just trying to survive. Prices of food are scary. Deaths of family members. Hussam's wife, her family house was obliterated with a bomb, and he tells horrible stories about them digging through the rubble to try to find survivors or those who had perished. And this is really raw stuff that's really really very hard. Now, when I ask them, what's happening, what the news is, all of them say we're hungry.
Yeah.
Literally, we're hungry. A man told me the other day he and his family hadn't eaten for 3 days. And they spend all of their waking hours searching for food and water. And they've all lost a tremendous amount of weight. Their energy is very low. They still have hope, depending on the hour you ask them. But they're pushing forward, and I'm heartened by the fact that some of them use the title of the book, No Way But Forward, as their closing messages to me after they described the events of the day.
When we first met, you were, in the midst of the research, which again, you've been carrying out for 30 years. And, I was delighted when I heard that you had published the book, but you also self-published the book. Can you talk about, why the book was self-published, your process of trying to find other publishers, and why you eventually made the decision that you did?
Yeah, this isn't an easy story to tell, but I was a fellow at New America at the time. That's when I met you. I was a fellow at New America. This would have
Right.
been 2014 or 15.
And current New America head Anne-Marie Slaughter blurb the back of the book.
Yes, she did, and so Peter Bergen,
Yeah.
who was my mentor at New America.
Yeah, and I do want to just since I mentioned, I mean, there's a number of fantastic, blurbs on the back. Janine DiGiovanni, Wahid Khalidi, Sarah Roy, Yasser Abu Jamal, and Anne-Marie Slaughter. But sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, and so New America, Peter linked me with a prominent agent in DC, literary agent. So when you write a narrative nonfiction as opposed to a fiction, you need to work through a literary agent first if you want to get the ear of the big publishing houses.
Yeah.
Whereas with fiction, you write the whole book first. In nonfiction, you work with agents to draft extensive proposals, kind of like a mini book, and then they shop that to publishing houses. And let me just say, I worked through 4 different very prominent agents in DC and New York, all of whom were excited about the project to start with, but in every case, for various reasons, decided that they wouldn't be able to represent it. And those reasons ranged from straightforward bias, that is, one agent wouldn't shop it to publishers unless it had the endorsement of several prominent Jews, and which I actually have. There are several prominent Jews who have endorsed this book. But the whole message was, a microcosm of the issue, that Palestinian voice can't be heard but through a Jewish filter.
Right.
Other agents,
Palestinians are not allowed to narrate their own experience, which is precisely what the book does.
Exactly. Yeah. The other agents were more were different in the end, though. After working years with a pair of agents, their decision was that the youth I was describing were just too foreign to American audiences, and I needed to pull out of them things that reflect traditional psychology that Americans would understand. And it was just another way of saying, let's not pay real attention to these people. Let's not really listen to them. So I went through years of that, and when it came, I eventually decided I'm just going to write this thing myself, and I approached also many publishers who have published books in Palestine, and for various reasons they didn't jump.
Mm.
And yeah, then I was left with the option of self-publishing it. And when October 7 happened, I felt it really urgent to get it out as soon as possible. And self-publishing was a way to get it out quickly, and
Mm.
that happened. And I think it's a very respectable product. It looks good, and
Yeah.
but I've never had the backing of a publishing house that have all the marketing power that they do. And so I just kind of had to try to
Yeah.
drum up interest myself.
Yeah. I mean, that's a frustrating story. I also think it's deeply short-sighted on the part of those agents. I mean, part of what I think is so valuable and beautiful about the book is, great, I think research, great journalism, but a lot of so much great art is based, I think, on finding the universal in the particular, in
Mm.
the specific,
Hmm.
and in, you know, lifting up the very specific circumstances of these three men and their families. I think we see so much that is universal and that is shared among
Oh,
all
yeah,
people.
right.
And it's deeply frustrating to hear that these agents were not smart enough or open-minded enough or savvy enough to really understand that. Um, so listen, I'm really glad we've had the opportunity to kind of to put some light on this book. I really encourage everyone who's watching this um, to go to get it, to buy it, to read it, to share it, to talk about it. It offers something. I mean, we have, in addition to being just substantively valuable in itself, I think it fills a need, a really gaping hole in our public conversation. And it's precisely that. It's Palestinians talking about their own lives and their own experiences in their own words, and in their own contexts. As we come toward the end of the conversation here, I mean, is there anything else you want people to take away from this book and anything else you just want to say?
I think you summarized it well. I just want people to read it, not because I wrote it, because I just organized it. I want
Mm.
them to read it to come to know who Palestinians are. And we have a fair amount of kind of snapshot testimony of what things are like, but a real value of this book is its sustained continuity of learning about these people for 30 plus years uh, um, as they grow and learn how to deal with their lives and forge a life that has meaning, and as much happiness as the circumstances will allow. So it's I'm hoping people will read it and they'll learn a lot about human beings. I mean, it's as you said, it's far more relevant. It's relevant far beyond Palestine,
Yeah, right.
right? And so
Yes,
this speaks to all minority groups or oppressed peoples or disadvantaged peoples who've had to struggle with power that manipulates them and abuses them, and there's plenty of that all over the world. So
right.
yeah, I hope you read it and share it as broadly as possible.
All right, well, Brian, thank you again for sharing your time today, and thank you for this extraordinary work that you published. And thank you, everyone, for listening, for tuning in to this episode of Occupied Thoughts. Please make sure to check out the FMEP website, www.fmep.org, for resources related to this podcast and lots of other great content related to Israel and Palestine. Please make sure you're subscribed to this podcast to stay up to date. You can find it on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Spotify, and also watch video versions of the podcast, including this one on YouTube. Thanks again to FMEP for inviting me to host it today. I've been really glad to be here. I'm Matt Duss, and thank you all for listening and watching.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you, Brian.